Week 2 in the books. Get this blanket off me. A good week. I'm 2-0. So I think I need to be, if I'm going to be doing recaps, I think I need to have a good record. So I'm happy that I'm able to do that, at least up to this point. So hopefully that gives me some credibility into talking about your matchups. And we're going to start with panic mode for Rick Sachs over here. I just gave you my full name. I guess it's fine. For Rick Sachs, it's panic mode because Team Glory Hole is absolutely choking. A team that we were very, very high on coming into this season is looking like a potential bust. Putting up 145 points is actually kind of good, so I don't really regret it that much. But Paco Libre with an absolute insane performance. Paco Libre, a team that we considered average going into this season, but let's see really what went differently than what we expected. I think it's pretty obvious. For anyone looking, Carson Wentz's gigantic 37-point game comes as a surprise to me, and it's something that we're not really expecting. So the question is, with Paco Libre, looking at this team, do we expect this to continue? Let's break it down. The guys I expect to continue to be good are Debo, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Travis Kelce, and Christian McCaffrey. The guys I'm concerned about, Carson Wentz, Antonio Gibson with Brian Robinson coming back, Jalen Waddle, given that there's still, you can't expect that two guys are going to kill it, and I really just think Tyreek's the guy to own there. And then Christian Kirk, who I also just view as that offense being too volatile. So with that being said, what do we expect from this team moving forward? I gave it a B preseason. It did lose week 1, but it just had a huge week. I think that's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see a lot of inconsistency from this team. I think there will be big weeks because there are some high ceiling guys. But I think because of the bit of inconsistency, I would maybe gravitate B+. But I still have a difficult time envisioning this team really going so far. So that means, all right, so are they better than Glory Hole, or is this just a temporary thing? Well, I think it was a temporary thing, to be honest. So when we look at Glory Hole, the running back situation this week was an absolute disaster. But we do need to keep in mind that Kamara was out with an injury, and J.K. Dobbins is still not back. So this team is looking completely different than what it will look like in a few weeks. So if you get them this early, of course it's fantastic, but it's not going to be fantastic for long because Dalvin's going to have way better weeks. You're going to get those two guys back, and all of a sudden you go from the worst running back group, which they are technically right now, to the best running back group in the league, and that goes a long way. At wide receiver, I still love Tyreek, and he had a gigantic week to prove to us that he has that value. I think DJ Moore is going to be a solid option for you. Is it time to panic with DK Metcalf? I have DK, so it's really hard for me to say, but I will say it's time to be nervous. His ceiling is just so much lower than what it should be given that offense. But they did say at the end of the week that they need to give Geno more opportunities, meaning I believe that they're going to be looser with the passing game, which they should be. And I would hope that DK is the recipient of that. It doesn't seem like DK and Geno really have that much chemistry. But with that being said, I mean, DK I think has 13, off memory, I think 13 targets through 2 weeks, and I think he's caught 11 of them. So it's just really a matter of targets at this point. I still feel like DK's startable, and if he is, and if all this comes together, I still think Glory Hole, I'm sorry, is one of the best teams in the league. I'm going to stand on that. So let's see how that goes. Week 2, next matchup. Caesar Trons over Team El Captain. A very, very close matchup. And yes, keep in mind, Glory Hole would have beat both these teams, but unfortunately, that's not how it went. And because of that, we are left with a win for Caesar Trons. Fairly lucky win to go 2-0. So my boy Caesar, a team I'm probably rooting for, although I gave them a not amazing grade of a B- after the draft, goes to 2-0, showing that maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. I guess we're going to have to stay tuned. Because what happened here was we knew running back was going to be good, and it is. Mixon's offensive line is a little bit disappointing, but Chubb providing value. Kyler Murray looks really good. The wide receiver group was something to look at, and it still is something to look at. The Robbie Anderson at wide receiver 3, and now a Judy injury at wide receiver 2, shows that maybe that Gabriel Davis injury could really cost you. Hopefully Gabriel Davis is back this week. Hopefully he continues to provide the value he showed in week 1. But I will say this is a thinner wide receiver group. I don't love the wide receiver group compared to other groups. I think it's one of the weaker wide receiver groups in the league. So with that being considered, is a running back group enough to carry you? I guess up to this point so far, yes. But with a weak Zeke, week Zeke. I'm curious if you use your running back depth. You do have Zeke as your third running back, and you have Miles Sanders as your fourth running back. Those are two guys. Maybe can you package 2 for 1, strengthen up at that flex position? I guess we'll have to see. But for now, Cesar Tron's looking pretty good. Team L Captain. A team I've considered average is continuing to be average now, 1-1. I think that's going to be the story of the season. I think they're going to be a fairly average team. But with that being said, the good news here is Amari Cooper. 10 targets, 9 catches, 101 yards, and a touchdown. And he had a rush in there too. That is really, really important because Amari Cooper, in a league where wide receivers are so important, was a really important piece to be that third guy to round it out, especially with the question marks that McLaurin's had at that 2 spot. I think you really needed you really needed Amari Cooper to show that value, and he did that. The Dalton Schultz injury makes me wonder what you're going to do at tight end, but I think there's enough to be excited about this team to maybe argue above average now. I think you're adding in the Bills defense being, I think, the best defense in fantasy this year, maybe in the most recent few years. I think I'm very curious to see what you do in that flex spot. I probably right now, given the period, I would go Stevenson over Jamal Williams. Stevenson got, I think it was 62% of snaps, which is great for him. So curious to see. You have a few very average options with Singletary, Stevenson, and Jamal Williams. Where you go, I think that could make or break a few of your wins or losses, including this week. In that flex spot, you had Jamal at 7.5. You lost by 3. Fortunately for you, none of those guys got more than 3 than that, so it didn't cost you, but I think in a lot of weeks it might. So curious to see where El Captain goes there. Next matchup, Team the Chairman, 143.96, beating Team Livin' La Vida Yoda, 120.26. I got nervous because Team Livin' La Vida Yoda is a team I'm the least high on going into this season, but they won the first week handily, and they had Josh Allen go crazy this week. So I'm like, when I was watching, I'm like, I think that means Team La Vida Yoda is going to win. That means I'm going to look like an idiot. Fortunately, the rest of his team did what I expect the rest of the team to do, because it's a thinner team. I mean, I think Elijah Moore is not startable. I really don't like Brandon Cooks that much. I was less high on Kyle Pitts than the rest of the league this year. The surprises for me, have to be Damian Harris with a little, not as much of a snap count that you would hope, still brings in a solid game. And then on the flip side, Devontae Adams having a really big off performance at 8.7. So I just think this team has some decent pieces, but I think unless Josh Allen goes crazy every week, it's hard to envision, with the lack of depth on this team that I see, it's hard to envision this team going too far. Kittle will come back. That's going to make the team obviously better, but I know C+ might have been too harsh. This might be more like a B-, but I'm going to stick by this team not being a playoff team this season. Next up, Team the Chairman, a team I was just slightly higher on, but thought that depth was going to be an issue. Top-heavy team, performs like a top-heavy team in some regards, in that Austin Eckler, 17 points, being one of the top contributors. Mark Andrews, 29 points, being one of the main contributors. I think, for the most part, that Godwin injury obviously makes your team a good amount weaker. But when you look across this team, I really am going to want to see a lot more from CeeDee Lamb. 11 targets, I would hope, is more than 14 points on average. Not that that's bad, but because he's your premier wide receiver at this point, with Godwin injured, you just need some more from him. I'm not expecting much from Devontae Smith. I'm not expecting much from Deontay Johnson even this season. So I think a lot is on the shoulders of CD being a wide receiver 1, Godwin coming back being a solid high-end wide receiver 2, and then I think we're talking about a much more competitive Chairman team. I talked about that already. So, okay, perfect. So the next matchup is, we went with Jared going to 2-0 with a dominant win, 230 to 136. Team we went with Jared was a team coming to the season we were pretty high on, gave a B+, and I think up to this point, you got to be high on them. I mean, I think there's a lot of people, as if we have fans. If there were fans and this was a hypothetical situation where that happened, a lot of people would be talking about Team with Jared being the favorite to win it all at this point. I mean, when you have a Lamar Jackson doing what he's doing, you're able to put 230 points together despite Leonard Fournette having an off week at 8.9 and then promising that he's going to deliver more touchdowns. You have an off week with Jamar Chase getting 10.8. I mean, you got to be just thrilled. You're set at tight end. I think you're set at running back for the most part. You're incredibly set at wide receiver. My goodness. If Rashad Bateman becomes a very good option at wide receiver, I mean, it's not, then you are the favorite. I don't like Rashad Bateman, So I'm curious what's going to go there. I think you do have great depth on this team. You have a lot of options to go with. Teaming with Jared is just going to be a force to be reckoned with end of the day. No question about that. And this was such a mismatch because Pain Train is just not very convincingly difficult to beat at this point. I mean, 136 points actually not necessarily bad, but falling to 0-2 and seeing some struggles with that wide receiver group mainly. So the reason I say that is, first, I guess I could talk about Derrick Henry after. I should have led with Derrick Henry. Juju Smith-Schuster, sorry. Okay. Juju Smith-Schuster is someone that people were pledging to be the number one option in Kansas City. Last week I'm like, okay, I guess maybe, but all preseason I really didn't love the Juju option. I did not see him being that guy, and it seems like he wasn't. Again, 3 targets, even though they passed a good amount. I really do not see Juju being a viable starter. The good news for you is you have A.J. Brown, you have Michael Thomas, and most people would say, oh, you have Curtis Samuel. I'm also not so high on Curtis Samuel. I think there's just too many threats on that team. There's too many guys going around. I'm not super high on that. So because of that, I'm not as high on the wide receiver group that I think most would be. If I was going by the books, I'd say A.J. Brown, Michael Thomas, Juju, Curtis Samuel, you're fantastic. But I really I have trouble buying into any of those third options. And I don't think you have that wide receiver one that's going to be crazy explosive, because A.J. Brown's good, I'll agree. But he's not like on the other team. They have Jamar and Kupp, both much better options. And I think in this league, you just need that stud wide receiver. So to tie this all back up, because I got lost a little bit earlier, and why I wrote in my notes concerns about wide receiver group, and then I was reading the wide receivers and I'm like, actually, it's kind of good. My issue is the mediocrity of this wide receiver group. I think there's some big names that I can't buy in so much. Good news for you is Zach Ertz is continuing to provide value. And Aaron Jones has an absolutely insane week. Ben, who's being Derrick Henry. What I was saying preseason, I told my whole league, if I'm the 9th pick and he falls to me, I'm not taking him. And people are like, first of all, he's not going to fall. Second of all, yes, you would. I really wouldn't. I think Tennessee is just one of the weaker teams in the NFL this year, and you saw how that impacts Derrick Henry last night. So I'm going to stick with that. They have to find a way to get him involved in the passing game. If they don't, then the tight ends are going to be in trouble, and I very much think Pain Train would be in trouble. So that's that. The final game is Untouchables against El Granas. El Granas with a win to go to 1-1. El Granas now at 1-1. A team that I also earlier in the season had some issues with. I believed that your running back group was thinner, but hey, I did not foresee James Robinson carrying value. I did foresee Najee Harris being a bit overdrafted, and I also foresaw, I believe, A.J. Dillon to be a bit overdrafted, but because of what they're saying about A.J. Dillon's usage, I think this is his floor, honestly, 9.7. I'm higher on him now than I used to be. I'm obviously higher on James Robinson than I used to be, and I'm still low on Najee, but I think as a group, that's a more serviceable group than I projected you to be earlier on. I think with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams showed his crazy value. The question is, when Keenan's back, will he? Because you have Diggs, who's fantastic. To be able to pair him with the Mike Williams we expected would make all the difference. Because Allen Robinson's a serviceable third wide receiver, but if you're banking on Allen Robinson as your second, I'd much rather Mike Williams be that guy that you can rely on a little bit more. You're going to get D-Hop back. You'll get Pittman back. You're going to have a lot of options at wide receiver. I'd love to see a trade with from this team. I think the depth is fantastic. I think El Granas is putting himself in a position to really make a run this early on. Untouchables going to 1-1, also known as Captain Corrupt. Captain Corrupt, the team that we were fairly high on also coming into the season. They go to 1-1 after not a horrendous week, but I'd say a below average week. I believe that this team was well balanced. I just didn't love the ceilings on some of the main guys, mainly being I believe this team had Javonte. Yeah, there he is. Javonte Williams, also Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I think that's what you saw. I actually think I kind of nailed it with that one, at least up to this point. I think there's a lot of just depth and being well balanced, but just not the studs that you see on other teams. Again, like Javonte Williams, 11 points. Goddard I like a lot, but 13 points. Hollywood Brown, 11 points. Mike Evans, 11 points. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 17 points. Jonathan Taylor, 9 points. Brady, 12 points. It's just a lot of and I think, again, to compete in this league, you need some more explosion. So I think Jonathan Taylor will get more involved, and that will be your guy you have to rely on. Because if it's not coming from him, I don't see it coming from the rest of the team consistently. I'm lower on Javonte than most people, even though I still think he's a good option. I don't think he's at RB1. So with that being said, can Untouchables put together enough wins? That's what we're going to have to keep an eye on. I do want to say for El Granas, Jalen Hurts is the real deal. He's that guy. And I think he's going to carry you to some wins. So with all that being said, I do believe that this team, you're starting to see some separation, but I do think there's still a good amount of average teams. So we'll see next week what else. And I just remember that Caesar said I could curse. So I'll end this by saying, fuck. All right, have a good one.